So, hello everyone, good evening. So, I'll share my screen just a minute. So, I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. So, I hope yesterday you went through the source code which I shared. If it's accessible, you can revisit the yesterday's video. So, in yesterday's video, I completed the full Angular course. So this is just the basic level of Angular. So, you can modify the source code to your requirement changes. So coming to today, so we'll start from the fresh page, so which is React. So today what we'll do is, so today we'll cover the concepts. So the concepts which we want to cover today is so that tomorrow we'll start with the project. Okay, so today we'll cover most of the theory part as well as we will code some of the React components. And then we'll see how the React JavaScript and then how the JSX and different fundamentals in React work together. So coming to today, so let's start with day 5. So welcome. So today's day is React. So coming to what is React. So I guess most of you guys would have come across the word React when you apply for any job or else sit for any interview. So if there is a front-end requirement, so the majority of, for example, like 80% of the people would say for React. So what is React? So React is nothing but a JavaScript library. So yesterday we went through what is Angular, right? So Angular is a framework. That means it has so many inbuilt routing and different state management and all other stuff inbuilt. But when it comes to React, React is very small. I mean, it's like a library. So this the problem with React is it doesn't come with everything pre-built. So what a React team did is, so they will just give you the necessary file so that you can create the UI. Say, for example, if you want to do some like routing or other other different stuff, you need to depend on third-party applications or packages. So now, so just let us just get into what is the React. So React is nothing but a JavaScript library. So it is usually used for front-end development. So yesterday we went through Angular, right? Even Angular is also used for front-end development. So then think of it as like a jQuery. So I guess you guys would have even come across like jQuery. So before all the frameworks like React or Angular or different or Vue, there was one OG. So that OG was called as jQuery. So now very less people will use, but still it's used as of today. So so React is usually, it's developed by the Facebook. So now it's renamed as Meta. So it's famous for implementing virtual DOM. So we'll come into what is a virtual DOM. The game changer why React got so popular is because it uses something called as a virtual DOM. This is not used in Angular. So this is a very theoretical concept. So we'll come to this at the last. So now you understood, right? React is nothing but a JavaScript library, which is used to build front-end UIs. So UI is nothing but your user interface. So now what are the fundamentals of React? So first thing is with React, the whole React application is divided into components. So yesterday we came across what is component, right? Component is nothing but, so what we usually do is, so the UI gets split into different bits so that it is more reusable. And then another thing, the key point in React is it uses virtual DOM. So what is virtual DOM? So we'll come across what is virtual DOM because this is a very theoretical concept. And then we have declarative UI. Say, for example, what is declarative? So there are two types of things in programming world. So one is imperative, one is declarative. So imperative means you define how to reach the process. I mean, step by step. In declarative, what you define is you just define the target. React will figure it out how to reach to the process. You understood this? So, and then there is something called as one-way data binding. So this concept also will cover today. And there is something called as hook. Hook also will cover today itself. So you just need to know which concepts which we are going to study today. So these are the fundamentals in React. So then coming to this, you can see, so everything in React is a component. It is used. So the thing is in React, there is something called as JSX. Let's see what is JSX in the next slide. So before that, we'll go through what are the fundamental framework timeline. So we'll just go through the rough timeline of how it was. So usually in 2006, for the front end development, right, there was something called as jQuery. So then they created Angular JS in 2010. So now Angular JS is deprecated. It's no longer used. We'll use only Angular. So and then in 2013 they created React by Meta. And then they created something called as Vue.js. And then finally they created Angular in 2014. So Angular JS, so don't get confused by Angular JS and Angular. Angular JS is deprecated, it's outdated. So we'll use only Angular. Okay. So then next slide is what is the difference between React and Angular? So we understood, right, yesterday what was Angular. Angular is you can see the image here. So what we are basically doing is we're just comparing React with Angular so since we went through what is Angular, if we compare something which we already know, so it will be easy for us, right? So what we'll do is we'll just see side by side difference. So here we can see Angular is nothing but a framework, right? It comes everything pre-built, but React is nothing but a front-end library. So library means it's usually lightweight. Okay, in data binding, so in Angular you have something called as two-way data binding, right? So what is two-way data binding? We use ng model, but in React it is one-way. And then in Angular it uses real DOM, whereas in React it uses something called as a virtual DOM. So we'll go through what is a virtual DOM. So and then Angular, the learning curve is steep. That means it's kind of hard to learn Angular because it involves so many different concepts there. Whereas in React, it is very low because it is just a library, right? And then in Angular, what we usually do, we usually write our UI in HTML and then the data in TypeScript. Whereas in React, there is something called as JSX. We'll get through what is JSX. And then you have something called as services. And then for React, for state management, we use something called as Redux. And then we have flexibility. It is less, it is more. It is less because React is kind of like it comes everything pre-built, right? So for example, if you want to create something like route or something like a template or something, you know the steps. But whereas in React, you need to figure it out more because we'll be mostly dependent on third-party packages. And then this is easy to upgrade. So you can go through this definition. So this is enough to just know the difference between what is Angular and what is React. Okay, so next slide. So let's just see the common tasks which are used in the front-end applications. So whenever, say for example, say you are only in the future are creating a front-end framework. So the usually main concept which deals with the front-end frameworks are, so first is app state. State is nothing but your data, right? So how did we handle this in Angular? Also using input and output, we share the data, right? So similar way, user action means our event handlers. So what are event handlers? Like on click, on mouse enter, on mouse out. So these are all event handlers. And there is something called as templates. So what are templates are UIs. And then every framework consists of a routing. So routing is used for to resolve with our URLs and components, right? And then data fetching through the backend. So yesterday we fetched the quotes data, right, through the dummy JSON through backend. So these are the familiar concepts. So say like no matter in the future whichever framework you're going to use, like React, Angular, or Vue, these concepts are similar with it. Okay. So then coming to the next slide. So what is ecosystem? So yesterday, not yesterday. So just now we went through, right? So what is React is a library. It's not a framework. So if you want to use routing in React, we need to install something called as React Router DOM. Okay, this is a third-party package. This is not developed by the React. So don't get confused by this name. So this is not developed by the React. This is developed by a third-party company. Okay. So if you want to use state management, you need to use something called as Redux. Okay. So these are the different ecosystems which we need to use in React so that we can build a full-fledged application. Okay. So this is nothing. So this term is called as ecosystem means what and all the requirements are there so that you can build a React project. Okay, so next is components. So yesterday we went in Angular, what is a component, right? So the thing in React, everything is a component. Say for example, if you want to create something like UI or else service, so in React, what happens is there is no controllers, there are no directives, there is no templates, there is no models, so there is no nothing. So everything you'll create a component. So every component will handle different parts of your React application. You understood this, right? So we'll see how we'll create a component in React also. And then, yeah, this is very important to understand. So there is something called as function and class component. So yesterday in Angular, we created components, right? So what was the command? Ng-gc component name. But the thing is, in Angular, everything is a class. But in React, what we can do is, there is something called as functional component. So as of now, it's 2025, right? So the thing is, class components, it's kind of like outdated. Okay, it's kind of like the senior. So nobody cares about this. So most of the code which like 80% of the people are writing are using functional components. So for this project and this session, so throughout this session, we'll be using only functional component. You can go through class component because this is usually used only to maintain your older applications. So nobody is going to write the React code using the class components. It's outdated. So React itself suggests that to use function components. You understood this? You can write, you have two options. So majority of the time you use functional components. So here you can see what is the difference between a functional and class component. So we'll go through the difference. So function component is a plain JavaScript function. It do not handles any states. So we'll get what is a state. So as of now, you just get to know the key differences between what is a functional and class component. So in class component, so usually the states are handled by itself. Okay, and then it can accept props. So we'll also go through what is a props like as we code. And then in class, the props and the sets are like handled automatically. And then function components are called as stateless components. So this question you may get in the interview. So if they ask what is the stateless components, it's function components. So what are stateful components is class components. So you can see the syntax here. So this class component, will not go through this class component because it's kind of outdated. So we'll just, you can just see the image on how the class components are created. So most of the time, so 100% of the time, we are going to use function-based components. So we'll see how the function-based components is generated as we code. So next slide is JSX. So what is JSX? So JSX is nothing but it is a kind of a programming language, especially for React. The thing is, say in Angular, right? So when we created a component, we got three files. What are those three files? One HTML file, one CSS file, one JS file. Oh, sorry, TS file. But the thing is, what React team did is they combined HTML and JS together and they created a new language which kind of looks kind of like magic. But the thing is, our HTML and our JS is written inside a single file. You understood this? So you can see at the bottom, you can see here const list with title. You can see actually this is a JavaScript variable, right? But this variable contains a HTML kind of syntax. So the thing is, so JSX, it's kind of complex at the starting level. So as you code, you'll get, so as you get familiar with it, you'll understand this. So just get to know that in React, you won't create separate HTML files, separate CS or, separate JS or TS files. You'll create a .jsx file. Whenever you create a .jsx file, inside .jsx file, you write JSX. So what is JSX? JS is nothing but a syntax. It is called as a React programming language. So this thing, it combines our HTML and JS. So which is JS or JavaScript together. So what you basically do is you write your JavaScript and HTML together. So we'll see how we'll create HTML and JavaScript together. So as we code. As of now, you just need to know the concepts of this. So get familiar with these terms because with these terms only you'll understand the topics in the future. So here you can see JS is nothing but a syntax which allows you to write HTML-like code. But this is not an HTML. So you can see here, right? Const list with title. So don't get confused. This is not an HTML. This looks like an HTML. So in the definition itself, you can see HTML-like code. It is not a HTML. It looks like HTML, but behind the scenes, React will do some black magic. Okay, it's not a black magic. So what React does is, so they're handled in such a way that You create a HTML code, but React will take care of the rest of the part of. You understood this? So now what happens is in usually every component, so we create components. Inside components, we create JSX. So what is JSX? A JavaScript extension. So it is a React programming language. So we write our HTML and our JS together. You can see in this third point, JSX looks like HTML, but it is actually JavaScript. Okay, you don't get confused by this. So as of now, think you're writing HTML and JSS together. But behind the scenes, what React does is it converts your HTML into your JavaScript all. Okay, so you don't get confused by now. So just know that you will write something like HTML inside your JS. Okay, so if you want, so this rather than theory, we'll see how this gets created. So before that, we'll just cover some topics. Let's see how to set up our React application. So first, yeah. So first, what I need to do, what we need to do is, so we'll go to our desktop. So here, create a new folder, React, and then enter. And then you need to open your VS Code. So now open your VS Code, file, open folder, and then go to your desktop. And then you need to select React, select folder. Okay. So this is not your regular theory classes. So I just quick revise this concept. So we'll come back to this concept. So as we code. So okay. Even if you don't understand, you don't have to worry. I'll cover those topics again. So once this folder is open, what you need to do is click on this three dots. So just a minute, I'll zoom in. So click on the three dots here, terminal, new terminal. So inside what you'll do is you need to see this command. First is you need to install Node.js. So since we already installed Node.js for our Angular application, right? So you don't have to reinstall again. So if you don't have Node.js, you need to install Node.js, or else your React application won't run. Why won't it run? Because Node.js is a runtime environment. So if you want to run something, you need a runtime environment, right? Something which is related to JavaScript, so that you need to install Node.js. So once you install Node.js, create a new folder called as React, and then you need to click on three dots, terminal, new terminal. Then once this part is done, you need to enter a command. Okay. So if you want to install anything related to JavaScript, what is our go-to command? npm, right? So what is npm? Node Package Manager. So what I'll do is npm and then create space VITE at LATEST. Okay. You can see this again. npm space create space white at latest. And then you have to hit enter. So once you hit on enter, so it will ask create white at latest. You need to install this package. So it is saying Y. Y means yes. And then hit on enter. And then it will say what is the project name. So as of now, I'll just create something called as demo project and then click on enter. And then it will ask which framework you want to choose. So you can see when you install something with white, right? You can see the command here. It will ask whichever package, like which framework you want to choose. So now I just want to go with React. So using your arrow keys, click on down arrow and then you need to click on React and then hit on enter. So once you do this, there is an option here. You can write your React with TypeScript as well as JavaScript. We'll go through JavaScript because TypeScript is a very complex language. So we'll go through JavaScript here. So you can select only JavaScript, not JavaScript with WSWC. You have to select the third option, JavaScript, and then hit on enter. So once you do this, you can see the terminal says done. Now you have to run these three commands. So what you have to do, just copy this paste it in the terminal, hit enter. So one command is successfully executed. So what is the second command? npm install. So you have to copy this, paste here, and then hit install. So now what it does is our white will install our node packages. So now you can see at the right side, React has created our demo project. You got this? So this and our Angular project structure will look similar, but is not totally similar. So but will be 50 to 60% similar. So let's wait until it gets installed. So before that, if you're working on VS Code, right? I want you guys to install some extensions for this. So for that, in your VS Code to the right side, you'll get this icon here. It looks like a cube. So if you click on this, and then you need to search for ES7. ES7. Once you search, click on this. Okay. Once you click on this, you have to install this. So I have already installed this, so I'm not getting that option. First time when you click on this ES7, you have to install this. So what this does is that this will give you shortcut commands to create components and all. So in Angular, we have something called as Angular CLI, right, to generate our components. But React doesn't have any CLI commands. You have to write everything from manual. So what happens is, so instead of writing everything manually, in VS Code, if you install this extension, right, so it will give you some handy shortcuts so that it will make easy to write our code. So I'll say this again, go to your extensions. It's on the right side of your VS Code, or else to the left side, it's up to you. So once you click on this extensions, you need to search ES7 and then click on the first link, and then you have to install this. That's it. Once this part is done, you can see React is saying successfully installed. So now, which is the third command I need to run? npm run dev. So I'll copy this and then I'll paste and then click on enter. So now you can see React has successfully opened my, is running my application inside a local host. You understood this? So if you're getting the local host, that means your React application is successfully running. I'll go through this steps again. First, you need to write the command npm create white latest, and then you need to select React, and then you need to select JavaScript. So once that is done, you can see I selected React and then JavaScript. So once this part is done, it will say you need to run this 3 commands. So you just copy paste these commands one by one. So this last command will run your React application, which is npm run dev. So once you will get something like localhost, just copy this. I'll go to my browser and then I'll paste it. So now you can see, so if you get these 2 icons, right, that means you're successfully running your React application. So yeah, so now you understood this concept, right? That means, so now you got to know, first you have to install Node.js. Second, you need to use this command npm create white latest and then your project name. After that, you need to click select React JavaScript. So once you do that, you have to run these 3 commands. After this, if you run npm run dev, your React application will launch. Okay. So now we'll just go through how the folder structure of a React application will look like. So here you can see you have something called as node modules, right? So this is a very large file. It contains all your node packages. Second is public is all for your static files. Say if you want to have some images, videos, some static files. So usually static files are files which do not change. So those files you can store inside the public. Second is SRC. So before we go to SRC, we'll go through this outer files. So white.config means, so this file is usually used by the white. So what is white? So white is nothing but a company which provides a service for front-end users. You can see if I click on white, this is nothing but a build tool for the web. So with white, you can generate different frameworks, different front-end UIs and all in a faster way. Okay, usually if you see any older React videos, so they'll suggest you to use create React app. So, but that is also kind of outdated. So, if you want to create a new React application, you have to use white. Okay. So once this is done, you can see you have a README file. So we usually this file is used for documentation. And then you have something called as package and package.json. So this file we went through yesterday, right? So you have dependencies, dev dependencies, and then you can see what is my project name, what is the version, type, module, scripts, or different files and all. And then you have something called as index.html. So what is index.html? Index.html is the only HTML file. This is similar to your what? This is similar to your Angular. That means with React, you can create single page applications. Single page application means you'll be having only index file, and then you create UIs for the components, and then you render those UIs inside your single HTML file. You understood this? So now this git and this git ignore is used for your GitHub. So now we'll come to what is SRC. If I, as soon as I click on SRC, you can see there are so many files. So one is main.jsx. So what this main.jsx does is this will render your app. So what is app here? App is a root component. So even in Angular also there was a root component, right? So what was Angular doing? Angular was rendering your root component. Similar way, what this main.jsx does is it will render your root component. So how do you call a component? So in Angular, there are two syntax to call a component. So one is like this, you have to close. The second syntax is, we'll see what's the difference here. So whenever you see something like this, right? This is nothing but your component. Okay. So here you can see in main.jsx, React is first rendering your app component. So app component is my root component. So now I'll go to my app component. So usually in React, if you want to create a component, the file extension is .jsx. You can see here. I'll click on .jsx. You can see this is how my component looks like. So now it will look something very complicated. So what we'll do is go to line 11 and then delete everything. Just keep this empty brackets. Okay. So now you can see if I click on this file, now everything is empty. So now inside this return, just type something whichever you want. So hi. So now you can see, hi, I am React. How are you doing? You got this? So what it's basically doing is app is your root component. You can see it is a function. So this is the syntax on how you create a function in JavaScript, right? So I will remove this also, or else you'll get confused by this. You can see here, it's nothing but a function. So what does function do? Function will return. So in React, every function, which is a component, it returns the UI. So what is UI here? This is your HTML. This will looks like an HTML, but this is not HTML. This is JSX. You understood here, right? I'll go through this again. So this is JSX. This is your React programming language. You understood? So now you have app.css, index.css. So here index.css is your global styles. So what I'll do, I'll remove everything. So click on Control A, select everything, hit on backspace. So remove everything. Similar with app.css, I'll remove everything. I don't want any styles. So now you can see it is just plain HTML. Okay. So now what we'll do is in SRC, there is something called as assets. In you have two options here. If you want to store in images or static files, you can use assets or else public. It's up to you. Okay. But the difference is if you store it in assets, it is more secure. If you store it in public, it's kind of secure, but you will be having some security related issues. So it's up to you. So now what I'll do inside SRC, the first thing whenever you create a React is you need to create components. So how do I create a component? So in React, you don't have any CLI to generate components. So you should have to manually create your components. So how do you create? So first go to your SRC, right click, and then new folder. So and then name it components. Hit on enter. Okay. Once you do this, right click on this new file. So now I'll just create a component called as something like about dot. What is the extension in React for the components? JSX. Okay. As soon as you click on JSX, you will get a React icon. Okay. So now here you have to create your component. So how do you create a component? What is a component? So in React, you have two components, right? One is function components, one is class components. So class components is deprecated. That means it's not deprecated, but it's outdated. So we won't be using class components. Majority of the time, we'll be using function components. So how do you create a function in JavaScript? Create function and then function name. What is the function name? Here, the function name should match with your file name. Okay. So there are rules, some set of rules. I'll add those rules in the comment on how to create a component. So first is every component should start with a capital letter. Okay. So whenever you create a component, you should not create with small. I'll rename this. You should not create with small letter. So the starting letter every time should be the capital letter. This is a rule in React. If you want to create a component, every component should start with a capital letter. Okay, you should have to follow this rule, or else you'll start getting errors. So what is a component? Is a function. So first, how do you create a function in JavaScript? Function and then the component name. So here the component name should match with your file name. So what is my file name? About with a capital, right? ABOUT. And then what is the syntax to create a function? Brackets and then flower brackets. Okay. Once you created a function, every function should return something, right? I'll write another component here. Every component should return a single element. So what do I mean by this? What do I mean by this? So every function should return something, right? So in every component should return an element which is JSX. Understood this? So what I'm basically trying is I'm just creating a function. This function I'm returning. So what am I returning? I'm returning a JSX. What is JSX? JSX is nothing but your HTML. I am about. Okay. I'll, this is how you create your function component. First, you need to create a function name. Every function should return a JSX. So how do you create a JSX? First, the thing is, whenever you return a JSX, right? This is the syntax on how to return a JSX. You cannot return two elements here. You can see React will throw an error saying that JSX expression must have only one parent element. That means you need to return only one element. So usually what happens is you can create something called as div, and then you can write all code inside here. So whenever you return something, you need to return it as a single element. If I create another element, right, for example, like P here, React will throw an error. It will say, dude, you have to return only one. Why are you returning two? So for that, what you need to do is copy and paste it inside the div. Okay, this is very important to understand. Every function should start with a capital letter, and then every function should return a JSX. This JSX should be wrapped inside a single element. Okay, you understood this part? So whatever code, it should be written inside a single element. If I create two elements, it will throw an error. Okay, did you understand this? So now whatever code I write here, the whatever code I'll write here, this code will get displayed. But if I see here, it is just saying, hi, I'm React, how are you doing? But it is not showing my about component. Why? Because I need to call my about component inside my root component. So which is my root component? My app component. So now what I'll do is I'll go to my app.jsx. So inside app.jsx, you need to call the component. So I'll say, what is the syntax on how to call component? Okay, the syntax on how to call the component is, first you need to use a left angle bracket, and then you need to enter which component you want to call, which is about. So it starts with a capital A, right? Capital A, B, O. Here you can see React will suggest about. So what I'll do, I'll go on about, and then you need to close it. How do you close a HTML? Similar. Okay. After this, what you need to do, you need to import here. You can see here import. I'm not getting the file. Can you know the reason why? The reason is in JavaScript, if you want to access anything, you need to export it. Okay. Here you can see I'm just creating a function, but I'm not exporting this function, right? I need to export this. What I'll do, I'll add a keyword called as export. So once I click on export, once I add export, this function is accessible throughout my React application. Okay. So now I'll go here. I'll remove this. Now you see what happens. As soon as I click on about, the React itself will add a import statement here. Here you can see there is no import statement, right? So what is the syntax on calling a component? ABOUT. You can see React automatically it added an import statement. So now I'll just close my about. How does it add? For it to add, it needs to know whether there is a function called as about, right? For that, you need to export it. Okay. So now you can see if I open my file, you can see I have two components rendering, which is this is my parent component. This is my child component. Okay, which is my child component, about component. So this is how you create components, and then this is how you call the components inside your app component. You understood? Everything is a function. If you are getting confused by this, you need to revise JavaScript because without learning JavaScript, it's very hard to learn React. Okay. So since in our syllabus there is no JavaScript, so I hope you guys revise JavaScript again, or else it will be difficult in following this. Okay. So now you created a function. So I'll go through what is a component again. Every component should start with a capital letter, and then every component should return a single element, which is JSX. If you return two elements here, it will throw an error. So you understood this part. If you understood this part, 50% of your React is done. Okay, so majority of the time you'll create components, you'll create a function, and then you'll start returning the URL. So now what we did is we manually created this component, right? So, but there is a shortcut here. Okay, this shortcut comes with the extension here. You can see on the right side, if you install this package, right? So now I'll create another function, another component with a shortcut. So for that, what I'll do, right click on this, just I'll zoom out, right click on this and then new file. So here I'll call this as a counter.jsx. The C should be capital because it is a component. Okay. Once this is done, there is a shortcut here. The shortcut is R A F C E. R A F C E. And then hit on enter. You can see as soon as you hit on enter, what the package will do, it will generate a component. So you don't have to manually create a function and then return something. The component itself will automatically generate. So this is a arrow function. Okay, this comes under your JavaScript. If you're not understanding this, revise your JavaScript concepts. This is an arrow function. Okay, this is similar to your normal function. And then this also will return a JSX. And then it should be a single div. All your code should be inside a single element. Okay, I'll show the shortcut again. RAFCE and then hit on enter. The component will be generated and then it will be exported also. You don't have to export it manually. So now I'll call this component counter component here. Okay. So now what I'll do, so if I open my UI, there is nothing displaying here, right? It is just about and your parent component. But I want my counter component to be displayed. So how do I do that? I need to call this component inside my app component. Just a minute, I'll close this file. This is not required. So here, go to your app.jsx and then you need to call below the about. If you want this counter to be displayed above this, right? You need to call it above. If you want the counter to display below, you need to call it below. It's up to you. It's based on your hierarchy, you can call it. So I want to display the counter below the above. So what I will do, I'll create a HR. What is HR? Horizontal row. After that, I'll call my counter component and then close it. Once you do, React will automatically import your counter component. So now, if you go here, you can see counter component here. So now you understood this topics, right? How do you create a component? What is the hierarchy? You'll be having an app component, and then you'll call all the components inside your app component. How do you call a component? This is the syntax. It looks like the HTML itself, which is similar to your Angular. In Angular, how you call the components, that's how. And every component should start with a capital letter. This is very important. Okay. So now we'll see what are props. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll just try to create something. I'll remove everything. I'll say here I'll create a H1. I am parent component, which is okay. This is how it works. Say for example, in Angular we use something called as binding, right? Data binding. So for that, there we add a separate HTML. So there we add a separate ES and then a separate HTML. But in React, in JSX, everything will be here itself. So what happens is every component will return a UI. But where does the data get stored? The data gets stored inside the function. This is where the data goes. And then it returns a UI. This is very important to understand. So all your data goes inside the function. This data will be rendered here itself. You can see it's very easy, right? So in Angular, if you want to make any changes, you have to go through your HTML. You have to come back again to your TS file. It's very frustrating. But whereas in React, you'll write your code here and then you'll access here itself. You don't have to create two files for it. You understood this concept? It's very important to understand. So now let's create a variable in React and then try to access inside my HTML. Okay, this is your HTML. This is your JavaScript. So if you're still getting confused, I'll add a brackets here. So this is usually your JavaScript code. Okay, this is usually your HTML code. What does a component return? It returns a HTML. And then all your JavaScript goes inside your function. So now here I'll create a variable. So let my name is equals to Leo. Okay. So now I need to access my name variable inside my HTML. Okay. In Angular, what we did, we use data binding. But in React, there is a syntax called as flower brackets. That's it. This is as simple as that. You don't have to worry about property binding, data binding, input, output, and all. You just have to create a flower brackets inside your HTML. As soon as you click on flower brackets, you can write your JavaScript expressions inside the flower brackets. So now what I'll do, I'll try to access my variable inside my flower brackets. So now you can see I'm successfully rendering my data. This is my variable name, right? Whereas this is my HTML. This is how you data bind in your React application. You understand this concept? It's very simple. You just create variables here and then you'll access them using flower brackets. That's it. Okay, so here I can even say, for example, I have something called as my name, right? So since I can write JavaScript expressions here, I can write something like 5 plus 5. Here you can see it will come as 10. That means whatever JavaScript you want to write inside your HTML, you need to use a flower brackets. If you want to access anything related to your JavaScript, then also you have to use flower brackets. Okay, this is how you do data binding inside your React application. So now we'll see what are props. Okay, props are nothing but short form to your properties. This is used to pass data from parent to child. So in Angular, we had something component communication, right? There we could pass data from parent to child, child to parent. The similar concept here also it is there. So if you want to pass the data from parent to child, you need to use pass props. If you want to pass data from child to parent, you need to emit events. Okay. Then usually props are immutable. That means they cannot be changed. And then props are passed as attributes. That means we'll go through how the syntax is used. So it is immutable, and then child components cannot modify the props. And inside props, you can pass any function, array, or whatever it is. So we'll see, rather than theory, we'll go through the code itself. So now what I'm doing is, so now this is I'm successfully, I know how do I create a variable, how can I render inside my JSX using flower brackets. So now what I'll do is, I'll call my about component. Once you call about component, you can see about gets rendered. So now say for example, usually we learned, right, whenever you structure a component, your main data should be stored inside your parent component. So inside my app, I have the main data. This is main data here. So now what happens is, I need to pass this main data to my child. So which is my child? About. The syntax is, you can see here inside the props. This is the syntax. I'll show this. If you want to pass anything from the parent to the child, you need to pass it as attributes. So what is an attribute? Say for example, if you use image tag, there is something called as SRC, right? SRC is a HTML attribute. Similarly, if I want to pass this main data, I need to go inside my about. Inside this tag itself, I need to create a property name. As of now, I'll give the same name. Main data is equals to flower brackets main data. Okay, if you're getting confused, main data for child. Okay, this is the syntax on how you pass the data from your parent to child. So in Angular, if you want to achieve this, right, you have to do a lot of circles there. You have to create input, you have to pass it as a props, access the input. Similarly, here everything is inside a single file. So what you have to do is, you need to create a variable and then attach your data which is inside your app component. So once you attach the data, this variable is accessible inside my about component. So now how do I access this? So now copy this and then go to your about component. Inside about, this is a function, right? So usually what does function get? It will get parameters or attributes. So here there is something called as a object restructuring. So usually props is nothing but an object. So whatever data you send from the parent, it will be as an object. So now I need to access this inside my about. So what is first is props. Props is nothing but your short form to your properties. So now I have this parameter access. So this is your props object. So now if I want to access this data inside my child, I'll copy this. Since it's there in the props, what I will do, I'll create another h3. How do you access something inside your HTML? Flower brackets. Flower brackets. A props dot. As soon as I do this, you can see. Just a minute. If you're getting blank, right, that means there is something error. So for that, to check the error, click on inspect, go to your console. Okay, you can see Angular is complaining. On code syntax, the requested model SRC component does not provide an exported name about. Okay, here you can see it is complaining that there is nothing called as a about. So for to fix this, let's try sending this data to the counter component rather than my about component. Okay. So now what I will do, I'll call my counter component and then I'll pass this data, main data from child data is equals to flower brackets, copy and paste this. Okay, once you do this, inside counter, you'll be able to access this inside props. So go to the counter and then flower brackets, sorry, props. And then to access this, you cannot create another div here. Angular will throw an error because JSX should return only one element. So inside this element, I'll create another h2 tag. So here I'll access props. Props dot file data. So now here you can see. Wait, I'll remove this import statement also. So now you can see main data here. Oh, wait, I'll change this. Okay. So here I'm creating a variable called as main data. This contains the data from app component. So how do I pass this to my child? You need to pass it as attributes. So you create an attribute name is equals to flower brackets, attach your variable name. Once you attach this, this variable name will be accessed inside your props. Okay. And using props dot, you can access the data. So this data, where am I getting this data? From my parent. Okay. The reason why we need to know this concept is there is something called as reusable components. That means you create a single component, the UI will look similar. Okay. But the thing is, when you call that component in different parents, when you pass different data, based on that data, you can generate varieties of components using a single component. You understand this concept? So what I'm trying to say is, here in app, you are passing this data. Say, for example, if I'm using this component inside another component, and if I pass another data, you'll get the same UI with different data. Okay. So now this is how you pass as a props. These props are immutable. That means these props inside the counter, they cannot be changed. Even if you change, Angular will throw an error. You just need to access and render the props inside your JSX. Okay. You'll just pass the data from your parent to child. This is the concept of props. So once you understand the concept of props, there is something called as a hooks. So here hooks are nothing but your inbuilt functions. So what team did is they created a set of inbuilt functions to which is kind of frequently used so that you can code it more easier. Okay. So the thing is, rather than the theory, so we'll just go through the definition of it and then we'll start coding what are the hooks. So React hooks are nothing but functions that allow developers to access React features and lifecycle methods. So we'll go through what is a lifecycle methods also. And then hooks add state and lifecycle features to the functional component. So what is state? So state is nothing but the data which usually changes. So rather than that, think of state is your main data. So you can call it as data, you can call it as state, it's up to you. But in React world, you'll call the data as a state. So every data is a state. So don't get confused by what a state is. State is nothing but your data. So now we will see the most commonly used hook in React, which is useState. Okay, hooks are nothing but your inbuilt functions. Hooks are used only inside your function components. Okay, there are some set of rules. Before writing a hooks, you need to know this set of rules. The set of rules are hooks are used only inside your function components. Hooks cannot be used inside your class components. So if you use hooks, React will throw an error. Okay, how do you identify a hook? Every hook starts with a letter called as use. Okay, you can see this USE, right? So every hook starts with a USE. So there is use state, use effect, use callback, use ref. So there are so many hooks which are available to you. We'll go through all the hooks. As of now, you just need to know what are hooks. Hooks are nothing but your inbuilt functions which React gives so that you can use some functionality inside your function components. So usually what happened is the reason why hooks came into existence is usually when the React team started developing the React, there was only class components. So inside class components, so the class itself is used to handle all the props, hooks, lifecycle events. But as people started preferring more of function components, what they did is they created some inbuilt functions and they named those functions as hooks. These hooks are started with the letter USC. So whenever you see something in React which starts with the USC, that means it is a hook. That means this is given by the React. In the future, you can create your own custom hook also, but that concept is not there in our syllabus. So we'll just see the inbuilt hooks. Okay, what is a hooks? You can see when usually use state allows. So use state is nothing but your one of the hooks which is provided by the React. Okay, use state allows functional components to have state. So what is state? State is nothing but your data. Okay, so when state is updated, React re-renders the component. So the thing is, if you create normal variables, right? Whenever you change the normal variables, React won't care about the normal variables. Okay, even if you change the data of a normal variable, in JavaScript, it will re-render, right, in Angular. But in React, it doesn't re-render. So whenever you want some data, when changed to re-render, you need to create a state. Okay. The states can be of anything. It can be a string, number, boolean. We'll see this as we code. And then you have something called as a setup function. Using setup function only, you have to change the state. You cannot directly change the state. Okay. These are just the theory terms you have to understand so that you can code it. Okay, hooks are nothing but your inbuilt functions are provided by React so that you'll be having more access inside your function-based components. So now we'll see. So now you understood how to what are props, right? So props are usually passed from the parent to the child. So how do you pass? You pass it as property name is equals to whichever data. This data is accessed through props dot child because props is an object. Okay. So now let's see. So let's create a counter application. So now what we'll do is I'll remove this. Let's create two buttons. Okay, this button I'll make it plus, and then I'll create another h2 here value, and then I'll create another button here minus dot minus. So now let's style this. So here the thing is this is JSX, right? This is not your HTML. So in JSX, you can't use class. You have to use something called as class name. Okay. So now here I'll give a class name for this. So I'll just make it a add button. And then here I'll create a class name for this also. Value. Here also I'll create a class name for this. So sub button subsection. Okay. So here next you can write these styles inside index, or else you can create a separate counter.css file and then you can write the styles. It's up to you. But as of now, I'll use global styles. Okay, here what I'll do, I'll copy this, add button. I'll go to my index.css dot paste. Second class is what? Is my value. Copy this, it'll go to my index and then we'll paste it. Okay, third class is sub button. So I'll copy this. I'll go to my index.css, then I'll paste. Okay. So now I'll style. Usually whenever you style, right, you need to make it as 2 frames so that you can see as you're coding. Okay, this I'll remove this unnecessary thing here. So where is this data present inside my app component, right? So now what I'll do is I'll go to my app component. Zoom out a little bit. So here I'll go to my app component. I'll remove this data here. This is not required for me. I'll just comment it. The shortcut to command is Control/. Once you click on this, it gets commented. Okay. And then inside counter, I'll remove this also. This is not required for. So now you just have plus value minus. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll start styling this. So for button first is I'll create a padding. I'll make it 10 pixel. And then font size. Version. I'll make it even more big. Now this is enough, I guess. Background color, light blue. Okay, then inside value, not required, I guess. I'll copy paste the same thing inside my. So now to make it align horizontal, what I need to do, I need to create a flex box. So here you can't create a flex box because flex box should be created on the parent. So here, which is my parent? Parent div, this div, right? So now I need to add a class here. Container. So I'll copy and I'll paste it. I'll make it display flex. Paste it. And now you can see it's fully covered, but I don't want that much. I'll just create a width. It's like 200 pixel. Yeah, now this is fine. Okay. So now what I'm trying to do is when I click on plus, so usually the value in the counter, it should start with 0. Okay. When I click on plus, the value should get incremented. When I click on minus, the value should get decremented. You understood this? When I click on plus, it should add. When I click on minus, it should minus. So now I will show the difference between a state and a variable. The thing is, so where do you write the data? Inside the counter itself, right? Because counter is a function. The data should be written above the return statement. So here I'll come. So data. So here is where you write the data. Say for example, if I have a variable here, let counter value is equals to 0. So then this is a button, right? Button means usually if I click, something should happen, right? So for that, what I need to do, I need to add an event. So in React, how do you add an event? You need to come here and then you need to click on CLICK. Okay, and then you'll get a brackets. Okay, in this brackets, you need to create a function name, handle, add. Okay, similar way, go to your subtract button and then on CLICK, and then you need to click on handle sub, means subtraction addition. Okay, now this is something called as callback function. So callback function, you should be familiar with JavaScript and nothing but functions which are passed as a parameter to another function. So here, since I'm passing this function as a parameter, I need to define these functions, right? So where do I define these functions? Inside my counter itself. So because in React, all the code, the data, the logic, UI, HTML goes inside a single file. Whereas in Angular, you'll be having separate files, which is a headache, right? So now I'll copy this function. I'll create an arrow function. The syntax on creating an arrow function is const is equals to brackets and then an arrow flower brackets. Similar way, I'll create a handler function for subtraction also. For that, what is the syntax? Const handle sub is equals to brackets. The thing is, in React, you can create, so say for example, if I have the subtraction button, right? When you click on click, you can create a function here itself. I'll show that how. So first is flower brackets, arrow. This is how you can create an inline function. But React suggests that you should not create functions like this. What React says is give a callback function and then create that function separately. The thing is, you can create inline functions also. But this in the future, as your application becomes very large, it will become very problematic. So for that, what you need to do, you have to create your function separately and then pass this function inside here. Okay, this is called as callback function. So once I click on this, click, this function gets triggered. So here you can see, how do I know which function is getting triggered by which? So for that, what I'll do, I'll just console log. Here I'll add two log statements. So add button clicked. So here in handle sub, I'll add another log statement. Here sub button. So now you will see when I click on this button, right, this function gets triggered. If I click on this addition, this function gets triggered. If I click on subtraction, this function gets triggered. So now we'll verify that. So now go to inspect and then go to your console, refresh this. So now if I click on plus, right, you can see add button clicked. If I click on minus, sub button clicked. So if I keep on clicking, you can see it will say the number of times this has been clicked 13 times. If I click on minus, it will say 8 times. Okay. So now, since we can't see whether it's being clicked or not, let's create a CSS called as an active index file. So I'll access this button. You can see if I click, it becomes blue. Okay. Similar way, add the same thing for your subtraction button also. So dot active means whenever you click on some events, so this class gets triggered. Okay. So now I'll add the same thing with the subtraction buttons. And then I'll make this color to white. What I'm basically doing is when I click on this becomes blue. Okay. So now this has been achieved. So now we'll see how do I change this value inside. For that, what I did, I created a component here. So inside that, I created two events and then I created a handler functions and then I define those functions. So once I click on this gets executed. If this gets executed, this console log gets executed. So this concept you understood, right? So now I know I can add and subtract. So now, and whenever I click on add, what should I change? I need to change this value. But this value is hard coded. I need to access this inside this variable, right? So how do I access that? Through data binding. So what is the syntax? Flower brackets, and then copy paste this variable name. Okay. Now what you'll do, if you click on, so now you can see it is 0. If I change the variable name to 10, it will turn to 10. If I make it 18, it will turn to 18. Okay. So now what I'll do, when I click on this button, I'll increment this. So how do I increment it? Counter value plus plus. You can see it won't change. Okay. I'll do the same thing here. It won't change. Okay. But if I console log that, so what I'll do instead of this, I'll console log the counter value also. Okay. In both the statements. You can see what I'm trying to say here. I'll remove this. If I click on this, right, you can see this is 19, but here it is still showing 18. If I click again, it becomes 20, but it is still 18. So I'll reset this to 0, and then I'll show now. So now if I refresh everything, if I click on plus, you can see here the value is 1. Now it is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but here it is still 0. If I click on minus, it's going to 5, but it's still 0. Do you know the reason why? The reason why is because in React, it doesn't care about variables. So whenever you have some data, and then you need to re-render the component whenever the data gets changed, you need to use something called as useState. The syntax on how to use a useState is, first, you have to click on USESTATE. So once this is done, what is used? It's a hook, right? So you can see as soon as I click on useState, it will get imported here. So useState is what? Is a hook. So what are hook? Hook is a function. So how do you call a function? Brackets. Sorry, outside this. And now you need to pass a default value. So I'll show this PPT. This is the syntax on how you create a state. The reason why we need to create a state is very important to understand. So when we create variables, so JavaScript doesn't care about variables. So it doesn't re-render the component to show the latest change. Right? You can see in my console log, the value was printing, but it was not printing inside my UI because React was not re-rendering. So whenever you want React to re-render, when the data changes, for that you need to use useState. So inside useState, you need to pass a initial value. Okay. This useState returns an array. So this syntax is called as array destructuring. Okay. So how do you destructure an array? So whenever this is the syntax. So if you're getting confused by this, you need to brush up your JavaScript concepts. So this comes under your JavaScript. Okay, this is called as array destructuring. So when you destructure, the first value is your variable value, which is your current value. And then the second value is something called as a setter function. The reason why React is doing is, I'll just say the typical concept here. Whenever you want to create a variable, so that the variable changed, so that the React will re-render it, you need to use a useState. And then you need to set a default value. So how do you access this default value? You need to destructure this array destructuring. Once you array destructure, you will get access to the default value and the setter function. So using the setter function only, you need to change the value. You cannot directly modify the value. These are the rules on how to create a useState. So now we will see. So now you understood the problem what I'm facing, right? Here it's incrementing inside the console log, but it's not displaying here because React is not re-rendering. So whenever you want React to re-render, you need to use useState. So what is the default value here? It is 0, right? So I'll give 0. So now what does useState return? It returns an array. I need to destructure. So this is the syntax. So what I'll do, before this, I'll add const array and then I'll comment this counter value, counter val, comma, set counter val, and then is equals to. Okay. This is how you create a use state. First, okay. This is how you create the reason why you need to create a use state, because whenever you create something with variables and then change the variables, React won't re-render. So for that React to re-render, you need to create a use state and then you need to set an initial value. This initial value, how do you access? You need to use array destructuring. So through array destructuring, first you'll get an access to initial value and then a setter function for this initial value. So whenever I want to change this value, I cannot directly change this value like plus plus or minus minus or else plus 5 or else plus 6. You need to change this value through the setter function. So how do I achieve this? So now instead of displaying this variable, I'll display this state variable. This is state variable, right? I'll copy this and then I'll paste it here. So this is my state variable. So now you can see it is 0, right? So now if I inside the use state, if I change it to 5, it will change to 5. That means I'm able to access state variable. So now I'll change this to 0. Okay. So now instead of, I'll comment this too. So now instead of directly changing the variables, so what I will do is I'll try to change this variable through my setter function. Do you understand this? So how do I do that? This is not setter function is nothing but your function. So copy and then paste. This is a function, right? So how do you call a function? Brackets. And then you can see VS Code will suggest value. That means you need to access this value inside here and then increment. Okay, this is as simple as that. You don't have to get confused. I'll say this again because use state is very important to understand because 90% of the time you'll be creating states and then you'll be handling these states. Okay, first you need to create a use state and then you need to set a default value. So use state will return two properties. So this should be accessed through array destructuring. First is your default variable. Second is your setter function. So default variable, you'll just use it to display. That's it, using data binding. But whenever I want to change this value, right, how do I change? Through my setter function. So through setter function, I'll call this function here, just copy inside. So I'll remove this everything if you're getting confused. This is just my handle add function. So inside handle add, what I'll do, I'll copy and paste this inside. And then brackets. And then what does the setter function do? It will change this value, right? So I need to access this. This is nothing but a variable. Okay. I'll come here, plus plus. Now you can see. Okay. This one plus is equals to 1. Assignment to const variable at handle. You can see here. The thing is, I used const here. But do you know what is const in JavaScript? It's a constant. You cannot change the variable name. It is fixed. If you use let you can reassign it. So what I did, I used let, and then I changed the variable. Now you can see it is changing. So similar way, what I'll do, I'll use the setup function here. You can use plus is equals to minus minus. It's up to you. So now you can see it's getting decreased. 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. Now you understood this, right? I'll remove this everything. I'll make it clean so that it's more easy to understand. You understood the concept? Using the setup function, you can change the. This is the syntax on how you create a use state. You understand this concept. Usually, most of the time, you'll be creating states The reason why we need to create states is React doesn't care about properties. So whenever you change something, you need React to re-render it, right? Only when it's re-render, you'll get the UI, or else it'll be showing the same old UI. So for that, you need to create a state, and then using array destructuring, you have to access these two values. Using setup function, you need to change the value. Here, as of now, we are just giving number. But in the state value, you can create another function. You can create objects, strings, anything. It's up to you. It's limitless. Then there are some like rules on how do you create a state. Sorry, hooks. So whenever you create some kind of hooks, right? Hooks should be defined at the top level. So here you can see hooks is defined at the top level. I can't create this hook at the bottom. You can create, but actually it's a wrong approach. Hook should be at the topmost. Okay. So then the thing is, at the last slide, we have something called as re-renders. So I guess for 20, 30 times, I have used the word called as re-render, right? So what is the re-render? So the thing is, since everything is a component, here you can see, here you can see inside the app, I'm using counter component, right? So whatever changes I'm doing inside this component, only this component should get re-rendered, not all other unnecessary components. That's the concept of components, right? So only wherever the data gets changed, only that component gets re-rendered. So for that, what React team did is there are only two scenarios when a component gets re-rendered. So why does a component should get re-rendered? So if the component doesn't get re-rendered, it doesn't show the latest UI. It will be still showing the UI. So we saw in the earlier example, right? In here, even if I click on, it was just showing zero. Even if I click on minus, it was showing zero because the component was not re-rendering. So to make it re-render in React, you have only two milestones or also like dead ends. One is when props change. One is when a use state is changed. How does a use state gets changed? When you use a setter function. Only at these two scenarios, your component gets re-rendered. That means when a component gets re-rendered, the latest data gets displayed. Okay, or else it'll still be showing the same old data. Okay, you understood these concepts. So I'll just give a quick result. It's 58, so there's still 2 minutes. I'll just give a quick revision. So you create components inside a component folder. So here you'll right click and then you'll create a new file. The component name should start with a capital A. And then you use a command called as RAFCE. It will generate a component. Okay. Then this component should return a JSX. So this is your JSX. How do you access JavaScript inside a JSX? Using flower brackets. And then all your data goes inside your function. So here you will directly write the data here, directly access inside HTML. You don't have to go through two separate files. Then this is how you pass the props to data. Once you pass this, how do I access that? I'll access that using props here. So using props dot, I can access that value. Okay. So and then how do you create a state? Using use state, it returns two properties. One is counter value setter function. Using setter function, you'll change the variable. Okay. So tomorrow we'll create a project based on this React. So try to go through these concepts. So if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comment section. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. So, thank you for your valuable class. So, we'll meet again by tomorrow. Thank you all. We are winding up for the day. Good night, everyone. Thank you.